Stephen next discusses Habit 1, entitled Be Proactive, and explains why we must take individual responsibility for our own life and choices.
The first habit, the most fundamental habit of all, is the habit of being proactive. That basically means you take responsibility for yourself. You get out of blaming circumstances, conditions, or conditioning for your behavior. Look at the word responsibility. Ability to choose your response. Responsibility. I suggest effective people are proactive. That is, they take responsibility. Their behavior is a product of their own decisions based on values, rather than being a product of their conditions based on feelings. For instance, you're planning a picnic with your family. You're excited, you have all the preparations, you've decided where to go, and it becomes stormy, killing your plan. Proactive people carry weather within them. They realize what their purpose really was, and they creatively have a picnic elsewhere, even if it's in their own basement with some special games, and make the best of that situation. The opposite of being proactive is to be reactive. Reactive people would say, what's the use? We can't do anything. Oh, this is so upsetting after all of our preparations. We'd made these arrangements. And the whole spirit of negativism will tend to pervade those people's minds and also the family. That's being reactive. Those who have studied Psychology 101, what is it when we call these two little boxes that are connected together? Stimulus response. They're totally connected together. Put out meat, ring a bell, the dog salivates. Meat, bell, salivate. Meat, bell, salivate. Take away the meat, ring the bell, the dog salivates. That's called reactive. The stimulus created the response. There's three fundamental theories of determinism that are widely accepted in our society, or a combination of the three. Determinism is the stimulus-response concept. That is, that our life has been determined by things outside of it, or perhaps by the deep internal scripting of earlier generations inside of it. First, it's called genetic determinism. That means your grandparents did it to you. That's why you have a short fuse. And besides that, you're Irish. And that's the nature of Irish people. Yeah, I have a short fuse. Everyone in my family seems to go through the generations. The second is called psychic determinism. That means your parents did it to you. That's why you're a night owl. You're not good in the morning, right? Neither were your parents. Or you're a compulsive punctual. You're just literally guilt-tripped right out of your gourd if you're late. Because you can remember deep inside the emotional scripting when you were very vulnerable and tender and dependent, the punishment that came, the rejection, the comparison with somebody else when you were late to school or to some appointment or something of this nature. That's called psychic determinism. The third is called environmental determinism. That means that it is your boss that's doing it to you. It's your spouse. It's that bratty teenager. That's what's messing up your home life. Or it's the economics of your life. That's what's doing it to you. That's why you're so unhappy and miserable. Or because of national policies, or the absence of certain programs, or whatever. The language of reactive people, of people who are determined by their environment, or by their conditions, or by their conditioning, or their genetic makeup, is I can't do it. That's my nature. Can't. Don't have time. I have to. I have to. I must. See, the whole spirit of that language is the transfer responsibility. I am not responsible, able to choose my response. The spirit is, I am not responsible. Psychologically, isn't that easier to say than I'm a flake and irresponsible? The problem is, this is a self-fulfilling prophecy. People who believe they are determined will produce the evidence to support the belief. And they increasingly feel victimized and out of control. They're not in charge of their life or their destiny at all. They're always in a blaming mode to things outside. They might even blame themselves, or they might even attribute it to the stars. Yeah, I'm Capricorn. That's why I'm so hesitant to make a decision this week, because it says in my astrological stargazing directive that I should not make any big decisions in this month or this week. I'll wait for next month. It says I'll have good judgment there. If I believe it, I'll probably act on the basis of it and produce the evidence to support the belief. You know what the database is for determinism? Primarily, it's the study of animals and sick people. Seriously. How do you like that as a database to talk about you? What kind of a vision do you have of your human capacity? Can you choose your response to whatever happens to you? Absolutely you can. Nothing can hurt you without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt once put it, no one can make you feel inferior without your permission. Gandhi put it, they cannot take away our self-respect if we do not give it to them. If you could emotionally understand this idea, you'd find it's the most liberating idea you can imagine. One time in Sacramento, I was talking on this to a large group of people, and a lady stood up and literally became so excited she started talking to people, then grew embarrassed, sat back down, but talked privately. I could hardly wait for the break to find out what had happened. I went to her and she said, you cannot believe what's happened to me. She says, I am the full-time nurse to the most miserable and grateful man you can possibly imagine. And for you to have the gall, the presumptiveness, to stand up there and to suggest, I am responsible? That I chose to be miserable? There's no way I could buy into that. But the more I thought about it, the more I swallowed that bitter pill. And I came to realize, now wait a minute. If I have the power to choose, if between stimulus and response there is a small gap of freedom to choose my response to the stimulus, I could choose not to be miserable. I could choose not to be any more controlled by this guy that I'm the full-time nurse to, who's made my life so miserable, who never even acknowledges me, let alone express appreciation. No longer am I going to, using my language now, empower his weaknesses to control me, to mess my life up. And she said, at that moment, I stood up. I was let out of San Quentin. I was let out of prison. I wanted to proclaim my liberty. I wanted to proclaim my freedom. Thrilling, honestly. I've never known a more inspiring, lofty, exalting notion in my life than the inward realization, the personal vision. That's what the habit being proactive is. It's the habit of personal vision. Never known anything with more personal vision and excitement in it than the realization I am able to choose my own response to whatever happens to me. And the further advanced realization that in choosing that response you can powerfully affect what happens to you. As I mentioned earlier, your head creates your world. And this is some of the psychology as to exactly how it creates your world. You change one variable in any chemical formula and you change the results of that formula. You change yourself in your marriage. Don't try to change the other. Don't confess your spouse's sins one more time. Work only on your own. You change yourself inside a family life. Be a source of giving unconditional love and support and affirmation and courageous but kind discipline. Be a source of working only upon things you have direct control over. And you watch what begins to happen over time as you make constant deposits into the emotional bank account in all the relationships of that home. I might mention a couple of practices that I have found helpful in my life. The principle is what I'm trying to teach, however, not these practices. The principle is make deposits with your relationships. The practice is I sit in the car before I go into the house and go through a little kind of affirmation process. I am fatigued. My family may be in there confessing each other's sins, and I sit there and say, I am now going to do the most important work of my day. It's in the four walls of my own home. It's not only the most important, it's the most joyful, the most fulfilling. As a husband and as a father, I'm going to bless my wife and my children by my touch and by my voice. Then go in, go to each one, look them square in the eye, embrace them. Express your love, express your interest about their day. Just do that. 5 minutes can change the ecology of your home, if it's congruent with the way you live in the other 55 minutes of every hour. Another practice with my wife is we go on a Honda 90 trail cycle every day. If I'm on a trip, we do it on a phone. If it's inclement weather, we do it in a car. No one can get to us. No kids, no meetings. And just learn to express feelings. If you want to stay in love, learn to express feelings, not opinions. Opinions are fun, but they're safe. Always stay vulnerable. You can afford to stay vulnerable if down deep you're invulnerable. If you're emotionally independent. And the first three habits will help us develop that internal personal security.